Go ahead and get started.
Yes, of course.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 25th Trustees meeting. If you will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Lauren, do we have any agenda additions or changes from staff today?
No, we don't.
We don't. I do have one agenda addition that was just handed to me at the beginning of the meeting, which looks like, or which should belong under 4E, under the Chittenden Solid Waste District representation conversation. There's a motion to approve or
I'll
amend the
move we
agenda.
amend the agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. And before we go into the guest presentations, if you are going to speak today, if you could do us a favor and make sure you tell us your name before you start so that we know who you are. And also, if you could sign in, it would be greatly appreciated. And so is there anybody in the audience that has any comments on something that is not on the agenda? Okay. So hearing none, we will move forward on interviews for the Brownell Library Board, and we will have Jean, if you'd like to come up and join us, you can sit up here in one of these chairs.
Hey, Gene.
I'd like to speak into a microphone.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It's
At least sit
actually for
near it.
Channel 17, not for the room.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you could start off, well, first, thank you for being here. And if you could start off by just a little bit about who you are, why you want this opportunity.
My name is Jean Grant, and I was invited to apply to be a member of the Brownell Board of Trustees by one of the members at the end of the school year, I think, last year. And I worked for 6 years at Summit Street School as a librarian's assistant, and I'm currently at Phoenix Books as a bookseller. And I'm quite passionate about books and reading, and really would like to further that for people in our community by joining the Board of Trustees for the library.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have specific questions? You want me to go into a couple?
We usually have questions. Do you want to go
Oh,
first?
I always have questions.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? I would just like to know, Jean, do you have any board experience with other organizations?
Yes, when my children were in preschool, I was the president of the board of directors for their co-op preschool that they attended. Yeah.
Next. That was it for me.
What do you think you'll bring to the Board of Trustees for the library?
I have a lot of experience with children and with books and with how libraries work. And also, I just know a lot about books because of working at Phoenix. I think I'm a really good listener, and I think I contribute well to groups that I'm a part of. I know the community pretty well, and I think I have a pretty good reputation in the community. I'm outgoing, unless I'm in front of a microphone. And
You're doing great.
And, yeah, I work really hard to find answers to people's questions and that kind of thing.
And I know they meet, I think they meet monthly, and so you have
Yes.
the time to
I do.
go to that. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Good.
Tuesdays, third Tuesday of the month.
Great.
So, you know, one of the things that we've heard on this board over the years is that Brownell is an expensive library. When somebody says something that Brownell is one of the most expensive libraries in the state, what does that mean to you?
That means that there are probably a lot of books in circulation and a number of employees that work there. I'm assuming maybe the building has many costs. And I know that a lot of people think that libraries cost more than they should. And I think that not a whole lot of people understand how much goes into a library. In terms of just the collection, in terms of the programming, in terms of the building, employees, all that kind of thing. So, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions you'd like to ask?
I'm familiar with Jean. I was next door to Jean for many years before she moved up to her current home. But I'm glad to see you put in for it.
Thanks.
If you didn't get this position, are there any other positions that you'd be interested in village government or park, any of these, advisory boards or anything? Is there?
I really don't know.
No.
Possibly.
Yeah,
I don't
okay,
know
just
really
curious.
what is available. Would you like me to work for you?
Sounds like there's an offer there, guys.
There's always openings coming up.
Yeah,
All right, there are always
I would be
openings.
interested in
There's other,
opening, yeah, for sure.
And I just have a question. Is this a 1 or 2 year, are there 2 positions open?
There are 2 positions open, and that's one of the things I was gonna say, is there's 2 positions open,
Okay.
there are 3
Yes.
people who are applying.
Okay.
And it is to fill 2 vacancies up
Okay.
until the April election.
Oh, okay, so they're, okay, and
Yeah.
then you run, okay.
And then after that, I don't know if it's a 2-year, not actually sure if it's a 2-year position or maybe it's even a 5-year.
Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't say.
Used to be.
It doesn't say. Some are 5 and some are lesser. Okay,
Yeah.
but this
Yeah.
is, so these are vacancies. Okay, I was
Yes.
wondering
Yeah.
what's happening. Okay, great.
Do you have any questions for us?
What is your process?
So the way it'll go is we'll have the interviews today. Like I said, we have 3 interviews. We have for 2 slots. One of the individuals is not supposed to arrive until about 7:30 or so.
Yes.
So at the conclusion of the interviews, we will then have a conversation about whether to fill the 2 spots now,
Mhm.
and if so, who, and then we'd have a decision by the end of the meeting, unless there's some other circumstance where we would decide to delay that.
Okay,
And you don't have to stay, we'll call let you know.
Yeah.
Or you're welcome to stay, but we'll.
Okay.
we'll
Yeah,
also-
you'll hear from a staff member.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And so then the next person would be Helen Donahue.
Thanks for going first. You'll have to ask me harder questions.
We're not
Yeah.
like, we're pretty consistent, we tend to ask the same questions.
So if you'd like to start off with a little bit more about who you are and why you've applied?
So I'm Helen Donahue. I've lived here in the Junction since 2011. Before that, we were up in St. Albans. And I love the library. I feel like I have taken a great deal from the library, and it would be really nice to give back a little bit. And I have a fair amount of board experience. I've both professionally and personally, I've worked on at the hospital in St. Albans. I was the support person for the board, so I took all the minutes and sent out the board packets and all that. And I do that now at St. Mike's, same thing, trustee meetings. And then personally, I was the secretary for Dismiss of Vermont for many years. And I'm currently doing that kind of work, just minute taking for my church, so fair amount of board procedure, all that. They told me not to tell them that I take minutes, actually.
Right, I would say,
Might not want to let them know.
They said, oh, no, we rotate that. Don't tell us that you're good at that. We don't want to. So
You
that's
tap the
fine.
roles and- yeah.
That's fine. But yeah, it's just a chance to give back.
What's your, do you have any thoughts about what the library trustees currently do and whether there are other areas that their responsibility should cover or shouldn't cover, or what are your thoughts about their general role?
My understanding is that they don't really get involved with the hiring process, that they're more sort of the direction of the library and managing the activities and the collections and that sort of thing is more their direction. I may not have that completely correct. And I'm not sure I know enough to have an opinion about that. I think, given the volunteer nature of the board, that maybe it's wise to not have the hiring be a part of their purview, but beyond that, I feel like I would be doing a lot of learning if I were to take this position initially, listening and
besides minute taking, what do you think you could offer the library?
Oh, I think I have a pretty good perspective from the user's standpoint of what they have to offer, so I think I bring that to them. I would be interested in kind of making sure that the library has the support that it needs, because I feel like it gives so much. I mean, the free childcare alone that that library provides
Mhm.
is extraordinary. And so I would want to preserve that for the community, because I think the community really relies on it. So,
Good. And you have the time to,
I do, yeah, I have a deal with my husband that if I get on this, I have to go off my other board, but that's
okay.
They've had me for a long time, I think that's okay.
Okay.
A similar question I'd asked before about how we hear that Brownell is one of the most expensive libraries in the state, and just what that means to you.
Great. I mean, no, obviously money's tight everywhere for municipalities, but I think if we're putting money into that resource, we're probably getting more than we put into it out of it in terms of benefit to the community. You know, that said, yeah, you want to try to make things as efficient as possible in terms of, you know, building costs and that. But I have not heard that, but if I did hear that, I would be wanting to see the numbers and show people what the benefit is that they get from that resource.
Great. Anybody have any other questions?
I'd throw out the same question if you would be interested in any other committees that you've ever, there's other things going on in the village.
I don't know that I'm as passionate about anything as I am about the library, but I had looked at the vacancy on the bike walk advisory committee, and I'm a sidewalk biker, so out of pure terror. My husband is a road cyclist, and I just don't think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family bikes, and
Yeah.
it's a
Good,
concern.
thanks for putting input there.
Yeah, thank you.
Ellen.
Do you have any other questions for us?
No, actually, thank you for asking all the good questions. I don't think I do.
Great.
Okay.
So yeah, as I said,
Thanks.
we'll get to the rest of the interviews later on, and
Great.
we'll go from there.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So
Can I
if
just- Can I just make an observation about the question that you asked regarding
Yes.
the Brownell? It has a high budget,
Mhm.
but it is among the highest quality libraries in the state. And it's a symbol of, the level of the budget is a symbol of the level of use.
Yep.
I just want to emphasize that it's not a problem that we have a sound budget for the library, because it gets enormous amount of use, and it's really unlike any other library in the state.
Right, and I hope that it is known that the intention of that question is not one to say in a negative way that I feel is too expensive, but rather one of, as we have approved the budgets that have come to us, that we feel very strongly and passionately about the library and the level of services that it provides, and that it shouldn't change. And I really wanted to make sure personally that those who are applying wouldn't say something contrary to that.
Well, I appreciate your clarifying that.
Yes, but I didn't want to show my cards too early.
It's an important thing to
Yes, absolutely.
understand.
So if it is okay with the rest of the board, next we had Kristen for an interview, but she's not scheduled to be here until 7:30. So if the rest of the board would be okay with it, if we can then shift gears to Alan Nye, our representative to Solid Waste District. Great. So Alan, if you'd like to come up and join us. Thank you for being here. And for those in the audience, this came about at our last meeting, where we had learned about the distribution centers and the reuse zones no longer being in existence, and some lack of understanding, I would say, personally on my part. I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but then also what some options can be, how the decision-making happened and whatnot. So Alan, as our representative, if you don't mind giving us a bit of background on the issue.
Right, and then after that, I'd like to talk and maybe get a little direction from you on compost.
Yeah, so if first we can address the
Yep,
reuse
right,
and then go to
yep.
compost. Yep.
So the board held a all-day session on drop-off centers back in June. We have, Heinsberg is building a new town barn, and we're having to relocate our drop-off center because of that in Heinsberg. And there's, Burlington has a very much overused drop-off center, so we decided that it was time to get the board members together and get some direction and guidance for staff to see where we would go. And as part of that, we were looking at the usage, safety, other things that are going on at the drop-off centers. And there was a concern from the full-time staff that the reuse zones are causing some problems. Those problems vary from children being allowed by their parents to run rampant around the drop-off center with cars backing up and going forward, and people trying to get into position to get rid of the materials that they brought, to illegal materials being dropped off at the reuse zones because there isn't somebody dedicated there to watch what's going into the reuse zone. That has included some hazardous waste. A couple of them have picked up large quantities of needles. So there was a recommendation by the staff to, think that with some of the other alternatives that are out there on the economy today, Resource and the Goodwill centers that are in Williston and South Burlington, that there might be enough other alternatives out there for some of the materials that are being put into the into the reuse zones. The other is that after a while, the materials that sometimes are put into the reuse zones are taken and put into the trash because nobody has taken them over a period of time, and they've just become cluttered, and then they have to clean them out and get them ready for more materials to come in. So there was a motion made that we talk about doing away with the reuse zones at that meeting, and it was seconded, and there was a vote, and as you are aware, the voting at the Waste District is weighted based on the numbers of people that you have, and it passed to do away with the reuse zones at the drop-off centers. Then that was going along, and all of a sudden we started getting some letters from Richmond, and at our board meeting at the first part of the month, the Richmond chair of their select board showed up and wanted that to be reconsidered. And so the Richmond representative, as any representative representing their legislative body, he made a motion to continue the reuse zones. And that motion failed. So we're back to getting rid of the reuse zones. I voted after hearing your discussions at your last meeting, and also seeing some other mail and whatever going on and listening to Richmond, I voted to do away with that recommendation and keep the reuse zones, but we were in the minority at that point in time. So the track right now is for the reuse zones to probably go out of existence towards the end of this month, the first part of next month. The couple of things that we have discussed, we have a building that is being used as the reuse zone, and we are more than happy to provide that to the community if there's a effort by the community that would like to try to continue the reuse zone and keep it in existence and man it or whatever else is out there. So that's where we are as of right now. The plan within the district and the direction that the general manager has is to do away with the reuse zones. So I can answer questions and
Great.
give you any more information.
Couple questions.
Yes.
Was there any discussion, and I apologize, I can't get into my iPad, so the information might be in there, I apologize if it is, but I'm wondering if there was, when the surveys were done, or however it was done to collect the data, if it was looked at by specific reuse zone, and if it was there any discussion of keeping the reuse zones that weren't having issues open and maybe just closing some of them?
I the motion was to do away with all of them.
All of them.
So I don't know that there's any, specific discussions by each reuse zone. I did notice there is a couple of people that make it a regular thing to go around to the reuse zones every week, and apparently they run year-round yard sales and pick up things and take to their yard sales. I noticed that there was the one from Essex. I don't know if it was in communication to you guys or to the select board, but there's a lady, I guess, that's done quite a business with reused books. Listening to both of those items is the reason that I changed my mind with respect to it, but
But it was a blanket across the board. They all
it was
closed.
across the board.
And I didn't know there was a specific building, because I take most of my stuff to Goodwill at Resource. So explain more about this.
Okay, there's a wooden shed, like a building by Andre,
Oh, okay.
that is at the back end of the drop-off center.
The one here in Essex?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's the same at the other ones. We have a
Okay.
building in all of them.
Okay.
And that, when you come to the door or come to the gate, I know when I do it, I tell them what I have, and, they'll tell me that really we don't want to see that in the reuse zone because it's not going to go.
Right.
Because they got some experience, and I said, okay, so I'm going to pay for it to get rid of it,
Right.
that kind of thing. But there's a lot of people that try to put stuff in there
That
because
they
they aren't
don't
going to have to pay to get
for
rid
it.
of it.
Okay.
And then the district ends up paying for it because we end up putting it in the dumpster that's, going to go to Coventry.
Okay. And are there signs or anything up around the centers now that are indicating to people this is gonna close?
There are signs, and also the employees are
people.
identifying, that's how the word get out basically at the start.
Okay.
That they do see the people that come quite often, either to use it or to drop something off.
Okay.
And so they know, and so they've been telling people also, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the building that's at the Essex drop-off, are you saying that we can continue to use it if the village, or town staffed it ourselves, would it stay there? Or are you saying it should come out of the dump and go someplace else? What is the
I think because
suggestion?
of the safety issues that they're identifying, that it would probably have to come out of there and, be located someplace else.
And would you guys help relocate it?
I'm sure that we would assist with that.
Or have other towns decided to go?
They're
that route?
looking at it, I think Richmond is looking at it. But the chair of the select board spoke, and then we voted on the motion that the Richmond rep made, and then he had to depart for another meeting, so he wasn't there, so we didn't get much backwash with respect to, what he had decided to do.
Have there been any conversations with any of the nonprofit organizations that you've mentioned about, instead of the municipality staffing or the community staffing, having one of them staff the?
No, but
Reuse
that's
zones?
a good thought, Andrew, and I can talk. We did, I think they did talk, conversation going back and forth at our meeting at the Williston School, did talk about, if one of the communities was willing to put somebody there, that it, would be able to possibly work. Coming from the liability point of view, I'm a little bit concerned with somebody being at the drop-off center, sort of working in conjunction, and where that puts us with VLCT and
Yeah.
insurance liability and those kinds of things. We've been very lucky. We haven't had more than some basic fender benders at the drop-off centers, but if you go to either Richmond or Essex or Burlington on a Saturday, I mean, it is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
There's 400 or 500 cars. They go through Essex on a Saturday.
Wow.
And then with the reuse zones, were there any conversations about, in order to keep them and to maintain a safe environment and to maintain an understanding of what goes in, what goes out, about changes that may need to happen there and budgetarily what that would mean?
We did have discussions, and we continue to have discussions about the drop-off centers themselves and the flows of traffic and people within the drop-off center. It gets very, very tight, and there are people that come with pickup trucks that can't back them up without, they have difficulties and those kinds of things, and the safety is a big one there, Andrew.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then trustees, were there any other questions about the reuse?
I'm familiar with it. I go every week, or not every week, but.
You're one of those in the pickup truck, aren't you?
I'm not a bad.
Causing the accident.
But no, I've seen it. I've dropped stuff in there, and I mean, like you said, Al, and like the board is saying, you gotta look at the liability not only there, but also people leaving car seats or anything like that. People taking stuff out of there, they don't know what they're getting. And if you're trying to secure a young child to a seat that you're picking up at a reuse center, it could just be a lot of trouble. And I see the reason given for shutting them down. I don't have a big problem with it. There are plenty of other places that people can bring things and see if they can be reused. There's a place around Pine Street that takes items, larger items, usually appliances and such. But anyhow, it's, I see that. Plus you also have the tree mulch, or the tree limbs and all this other debris, leaves and such that are people coming in and out of there with that, so it does get hectic.
So if there's no other questions from the board, I know that there was a gentleman in the audience, Peter, who handed out these survey results to me before the meeting had started. I don't know if, to help educate, I'll say for me personally, could you speak a little bit as to where this came from?
Sure.
And,
I had,
and feel free to come up by the microphone and state who you are.
Sure, my name's Jesse. I
Oh, Jesse, sorry.
printed out this survey from your retreat packet from June, and basically it came out last year. A survey of close to 600 people, and in regards to the safety, 0 people thought the safety at the reuse zones were poor. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
I mean, you're saying safety is the main issue here, but the 600 people are saying.
Well, we have professional staff that we hire, and we listen to them the same as, everybody else. And the person that is in charge of the drop-off centers and our engineer both believe strongly that safety is an issue. And so as a board member, and I have been involved, because I'm an engineer, I've been involved in traffic safety and a few other things, but I haven't spent time at the drop-off centers. But there are professional staff that we hire, and the board, listens to them. Somebody coming in and filling out a survey is valuable information, but I think the board listened to our engineer and our chief of the drop-off centers with respect to how they felt. It isn't any skin off their back with whether we have the sites or not. They're just expressing a concern with respect to what's what they've seen.
Do they have any photos or documentation or data on the frequency of items?
Well, I don't know that you're gonna get a photo of somebody walking behind a car, because you're not gonna be prepared to take that photo when it's happening. No, I don't know that it's there. I think it's a feeling that they've got from spending hours and hours at the drop-off centers.
Alan, I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. The communities, the second vote, the communities who still voted to close up, if you
Yeah.
remember.
I know that Heinsberg and Essex and the Junction voted to retain them.
Okay.
I know that Burlington, Jericho, South Burlington, voted, those are the ones I can
Okay.
remember. I was
And
just
they had
thinking
the-
who was sitting near me and what I
Right.
heard them say
Okay.
during the vote,
Okay,
yeah.
So it
Thank
would
you.
seem like to prevent this from continuing, to prevent the reuse zones from leaving, that we'd really have to work with our external communities or with our neighboring communities. As you said, you voted to keep them, so it sounds like, which appreciate, but it sounds like to really inflict a change with that vote, it wouldn't really be with you, it would be with your colleagues or peers from other organizations or other communities.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I mean, you guys run into the same thing. I know when I spent time on the select board, if you have, Dennis come in and tell you that you got a safety hazard up on Sand Hill Road, I don't go and stand on Sand Hill Road and look at the issue. I'm taking
Right.
his professional opinion with respect to that, and I think that's what you're hearing from from our professional staff at the Waste District also.
Right. Great.
well, I will actually, take some time and reach out to the chair of the Richmond Select Board and just
Mhm.
see if there's anything that they're doing that we might wanna do, or, I mean, it might be
Right.
a non-issue, but I will take that on to at least make a phone call.
That'd be great, and if it is a final decision that does end up happening at the Essex reuse zone, I think it would also make sense possibly in both the town and the village annual reports to make sure that the information is there. Especially for those of us, I'll put myself in this bucket where we're there maybe every 3 or 4 months, and so to not go there expecting that.
Right.
Right.
And after tonight's meeting, I will get a hold of the general manager, and she knew I was coming tonight, and we'll tell her that, the village would really like to retain it at the Essex Drop-Off Center.
Mhm.
And, it just doesn't do anything more than,
Right.
making
Right.
sure that your voice is heard. So,
But having that opportunity to know, and then also if we do, what it would take. Yes, Dan?
Not to further this much, but just the fact that it's at the drop-off center here in Essex, in the town of Essex, not within the confines of the village, but it's it's used by anybody. And in actuality, I don't bring my trash to the drop-off center there, I bring it over to Richmond or Williston because it's closer for me, it's easier to get to. So it's really, as far as that goes, I received all the information from the guy over at the Williston place there, I'm a regular. And so maybe the town of Essex may want to, take it or outside the village, put it somewhere up towards the center. Who knows, but maybe it's something in discussion that, like you said.
Yeah, I mean,
If you have this,
I'm not
board.
questioning the decisions that are being made by the paid staff at all. It just is something that I know the community values,
Mhm.
and, the least we can do is make a phone call to Richmond. I honestly am not suggesting that we take on the village municipality a reuse zone. I mean, I
Right.
think there's enough other places for it to be. But, I'll make a phone call and
Yeah.
get some information.
Thank you. So if we're good with the reuse zones, I know Alan, you said you wanted to also talk about compost.
yeah, we are seeing a continual rise in the amount of organic material that is being brought to the compost operation. And that's as a result, of course, of the legislation that was passed in Montpelier. And we expect that number, right now, we're about 6,000 tons. And we expect that number to rise to about 10,000 tons. When
Annual or monthly?
annual,
Okay.
when it's put into, full operation in 2020. Our current operation cannot handle that much organic material. So we are looking at what we can do to be able to handle the amount of organic material that we expect to receive. We've had a professional compost consultant, didn't know there was such a thing, but take a look at our operation, and it looks like, what we put in after we took it over from the Intervale has been treating us fairly well, other than we're having to dump money into it every year, because it's not a financially not a financial cow, we're making money on it. But there is, it looks like that if we were to expand the operation, it's gonna require some modifications to the processes that we use, and there's gonna be a price tag affixed to that, and that price tag is gonna probably run in the $3 to $4 million. We are doing some things to simplify it. We right now have, I think, 11 bagged products that we sell out there on the economy, and I think we're gonna be getting rid of a lot of those, and just gonna be making compost and topsoil probably, and not looking to sell more in bulk than we are in bags, because it's a time-consuming job to bag that material, and it appears that there may be, but I wanted to make you aware that we are looking at probably modifications there that are gonna cost money. That money probably would be obtained through a bond and a bond vote. If we do go to bond something, we probably are looking to do something also at the material recycling facility, which is really undersized for what we're currently doing today. It's, been there 20-something years, and it's still the same size it was when we first started the operation there. And as I think you've probably seen some of the information, it's been in the paper a little bit, the price of recycled materials has dropped considerably, and we're raising the tip fee at that location so we can get closer to an even budget, excuse me, with respect to that. But there is probably, it probably is 2 years out probably before we can, get designs done and figure out what the costs are gonna be, but the waste district is probably looking at a bond. The other option we have, of course, is to tax the municipalities, which is what they did the first couple of 3 years that they were in existence, and then we started making enough money, or, each program paid for itself.
Yeah.
But, so, I'm a little bit concerned because the 10,000 tons of organic material is gonna generate about 31,000 yards of compost.
Wow.
And I don't know that there is a market, and this is just Alan talking with no, I didn't hire the consultant, so, but I don't know that there's a demand for 31,000 yards of compost out there, especially since every other community or waste district is going to be starting the organic, or most of them are going to be starting the organic process, and so there's going to be more compost and more materials available.
Do you have an estimated timeline as to when any kind of a bond vote may?
It would probably be 2 years
Okay.
Before we would get to that.
Okay.
Are you seeing, let me start over, without the legislation, do you foresee that the organic matter would continue to increase on its own, or do you think that's what's really causing the jump in the?
That's,
That's it.
I think that's what's seeing, we have public relations teams that go out there and talk to the restaurants and the institutions and everything else. I mean, we've got all the big ones, the schools and the hospitals and those kinds of things, but now it's those smaller restaurants that are starting to have to do that. Whatever, I know I came to you, maybe it was almost a year ago probably, and talked a little bit about the inequities being forced on the Chittenden County people with respect to, like Essex County is gonna get away and not have to, collect organics, I believe, because they don't have a facility to take it within 25 or 30 miles, and they have everybody up there's got backyards that they can,
That they can do that.
do some of that with also, but, but it's you know, to be in the business, we were one of the first municipal compost operations in the country. And they're selling compost down on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard and, you know, those kinds of things. And then there's a whole bunch of other people who are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
thanks.
but I'm just, you know, we are in discussion about it, and I thought I would let you know as soon as I could, so that if there are concerns, you know, I can take it back.
We appreciate that. Trustees, any concerns, questions?
It's gonna be interesting. I mean, the enforcement aspect of it I can see where you have PR people going out, speaking with the institutions such as the schools and hospitals and larger facilities or sites. But residentially, to deal with this, and I know it was brought up to you before, but I see this as being a big problem with rodents. I mean, it's bad enough with skunks, raccoons, and just, I see this being a big, big issue. Well, we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, it's,
Yep.
gonna be interesting.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay,
So thank you for coming out, we really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
appreciate it, okay, very good, have a great day.
You as well, thank you. So next on the agenda, we would have old business of appointments to the Brownell Library Board, but again, Kristen is not set to arrive until 7:30. So if, with the board's permission, if we can move on to 6A, new business, EJRP's request for a waiver of no alcohol ordinance. And Lauren, if you'd be willing to get Brad on the phone, as he will be joining us remotely.
So I can never get online here.
If you go into the settings and go as if you're gonna connect to the Wi-Fi, do you then get a pop-up?
It automatically takes me to Essex Public Wireless. And then,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it is now.
But then I can't, but there's no,
there's no pop-up that comes.
If you wait, like, go to Wi-Fi, so choose that, and now wait for it. You should get a pop-up now. Give it a second or two.
Free.
Hi, Brad. It's Lauren. Hi. I'm gonna put you on speakerphone, okay?
Shut off Wi-Fi and turn it back on.
Okay, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear him?
Hi, Brad.
Hi, Brad.
Right?
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thank you for taking the time from wherever you are to join us.
Sure, no worries. I'm in Indianapolis at the National Parks and Rec Conference.
Oh, well, hope it is going
I
well.
love Indianapolis.
Yes.
Great city.
So Brad, to be expeditious of your time, if you want to go ahead and introduce us to to your request.
Sure. Well, hopefully you got the memo components that I sent over. But basically, as you probably are all aware, there is a current ordinance in place in the village that prohibits the consumption of alcohol in the public parks. And we have put together an event coming up in October, and we are interested in trying to offer beer as a part of the event. And it's a barbecue event from 12 to 2 on a Saturday afternoon, on Saturday, October 13th. So we have 3 barbecue vendors lined up, ready to go. And we have met with First Republic Brewing, and they confirmed today that they're available and interested. So I think we would just start with, that one beer vendor for this year, and obviously monitor things and see how it goes, and, consider either doing just one beer vendor again next year, or consider, expanding the battle of the barbecue concept to maybe having a couple of other beer vendors. So we are requesting a waiver of the ordinance from 12 to 2 for Saturday, October 13th. And of course, we would need to make sure that all DLC rules and regulations are followed, which mostly would be the responsibility of First Republic. And also, we just need to do some confirming with VLCT on our insurance requirements, if there's anything specific
Thank you, Brad. So a couple of quick questions, one going right into that portion with VLCT. Has it been identified as to whether it is even allowable by VLCT at this point?
No, that's not been confirmed.
Can I say something?
My,
Brad, I called VLCT about
go
it.
ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I called VLCT, I spoke to Pam Fecto,
Okay,
and she indicated that as long as they had a license to serve alcohol, and that we were named as additional insured on their insurance, and that we get a certificate of insurance from them, that she
Yep.
didn't see a problem with it. So that was her take on it.
Okay.
great.
Did she mention at all if this would then have any future impacts on our insurance rates and whether this would then expose the village to additional risk and then additional
No,
costs?
I think she felt that all of liability is on the First Republic.
Okay.
Wouldn't be.
And then, Brad, for me, one of the things I personally struggle with, I think of what I see as the mission statement of EJRP about creating community through people, parks, and programs. And this one component about alcohol, how I struggle to see how that links in with the mission. And I'm wondering if you can speak about that.
Yeah, well, I guess twofold. One, I would spin it back maybe, Andrew, and say, how does the prohibition of alcohol align with the mission? You know, I don't believe personally or professionally that there's anything inherently wrong with it. So, you know, I guess you could, in some ways you could flip it around. We're obviously addressing and dealing with this due to, at some point, the trustees, you know, decided that alcoholic beverages should be prohibited from the park. That's not necessarily the stance that other municipalities take, and I'm not suggesting that we examine that or have that conversation at all today. But just, you know, Colchester, you can go to parks and you can consume alcohol. Burlington, you can go to parks and consume alcohol. South Burlington, you can go to parks and consume alcohol. I know at least two of those communities, Burlington and South Burlington, host a variety of events that not only include alcohol, but also focus on alcohol. So, you know, I guess we're entering this conversation, I think, from an interesting position of it being established no. I guess in terms of your specific question though of alignment, you know, we provide recreational and educational opportunities for the members of our community. And so to do a family-friendly event on a Saturday afternoon, to offer some beers for a couple of hours, doesn't seem to me that it necessarily does not align with our mission.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Does anybody have other questions that you'd like to ask at this point?
I don't have any questions. I will just say, you know, part of the Steam Fest event, First Republic did a beer garden, and, you know, there were families there. I didn't hear of any issues. I didn't see any issues. I volunteered at several of the events. You know, no one complained about having a beer garden. Quite a few people said it was a nice addition. You know, I personally think this is a easy, simple, contained, because it's a 12 to 2 way to see what happens and see what the feedback is from the community.
I agree with Lori. I agree with you, Brad. The summer street party that we have here on Railroad Street, Railroad Avenue, that, you know, people are out there. They're not necessarily, it's not sanctioned by the event itself, but we have several bars right there. People are drinking, walking around after having drank a beer or two. At the farmer's market, there's tastings for wine. There's alcohol is kind of part of our society. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, involved with this society. I don't think it's a big issue. I think it's contained, like Lori said. It's a limited time. It's not late at night. And it's right now it's just going to be one vendor, a local vendor at that, you know, so First Republic right just down the street from there. So I think it's a win-win in a lot of ways. I think this would be great. The weather's nice.
there any other questions or comments or concerns? The only other comment that I had, Brad, it looked like in the plan about monitoring consumption was to have EJRP staff be a part of the monitoring on that. What I'm curious on is, have you explored looking into any of like the private security companies, like the Green Mountain Concert Services, where I know that's one of the things that they do as well, is help to monitor age, to help again alleviate the village from making a decision about whether someone has had too much, whether someone should have any, and putting that onto somebody else to help alleviate the risk that we are exposed to and that our staff are exposed to.
Sure. Well, First Republic will be responsible for checking IDs, so that won't be a liability that any of us have. I think when Pat and I met with Sean, and why we wrote that, included that in there, is that we'll be present at the event. And, Sean, just, if there's a lot of people there, then you just need to be actively monitoring to make sure that only people with risk bracelets are the ones consuming alcohol. I think those are good considerations for the future, Andrew. If the event gets bigger and maybe has more breweries or has a strong following, my best guess is for this first time event that it's not going to be crazy busy. It's light outside. It's in the afternoon. That between Sean and his staff and myself and some others who will be present, just keeping an eye out on those things, that it will be sufficient. But certainly, I think it's something we could revisit in the future.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that the trustees waive Chapter 3, Section 303A of the Village Ordinance for Saturday, October 13th from 12 to 2 p.m. for the Battle of the Barbecue event at Essex Junction Parks and Recreation, 75 Maple Street. All Vermont Department of Local Control and Village Insurance requirements need to be met for this to happen.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. So,
Thanks, Brad.
thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
Enjoy your
Okay,
meeting.
great. So we're good to go. It sounds like you're a smaller group tonight.
Yep.
Yes, George isn't here.
3-1.
Great.
You have been
Well,
approved.
Thank you all for your time. Hope the rest of your meeting goes well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
All right, have a good one.
Night.
So seeing as Kristen isn't here, Robin, if you want to come join us and speak with us about creating meadows on municipal property.
I was just thinking I should have had you guys up at my house. I've got two little meadows. One's just finishing his first year and one's just finishing his second year.
Nice.
A bit like me though, they're both past their best.
So Robin, if you want to
So,
introduce us to this?
yeah, a couple of things. One resident figure had been calling because children, he says children are getting into a certain area and they're throwing stones down into his garden, and hitting the house and so on. And so we tried, this was in the last 4 months, we tried, Public Works didn't cut a certain section of lawn or grass. As it got a bit taller, less people went into it. I used to be on the board of an arboretum in Philadelphia, and it was all volunteers who came out on the busy days. And we tried very hard to cut all the grass and get it ready for the 4th of July. It was a big event. But people always park under the trees, they'd have their barbecue under the trees, they'd go where, we didn't really want them to go. And it was difficult to get them to move. So one year we tried not cutting the grass, rather than cutting it every day for a month to get ready for 4th of July. We didn't cut it, or we didn't want people to go. And there was a thunderstorm the night before, and the grass was 3 feet high and very wet, and people didn't want to walk through it, so it was sort of, we controlled them by not cutting the grass where we moved again. So I talked to Rick Jones, and they spend a lot of time cutting grass, 7 months a year. It's resource heavy, and they need the machines, they need the staff. And also, meadows are good for apple trees, for peach trees, for plums, for fruit trees, all sorts of vegetables. We thought it might be a nice way just to have a pilot scheme. We haven't picked any pieces of land to see if we didn't cut it for a year or two. We'd have to manage it. For instance, in my property, when the wild parsnip comes up, I just use old hedge clippers and just cut it at ground level. You do that for about a month, It lets other stuff out compete it, like goldenrod and so on. And then you don't have to cut it anymore. And it looks very beautiful. So we thought we'd give it a go for a year as a pilot scheme. It does take 3 years for the meadow to regenerate itself, for the plants that you've managed it to prefer to come through, and see what happens.
Great. And so you said you didn't have parcels already in mind?
We haven't
or
picked any
locations yet?
Rick said that we do, as he calls it, a Ricky ride run. If the trustees said it was worth taking a look at.
I'm
Yeah, we
curious
can-
just to know which ones might be chosen.
Well, the one he didn't cut was up in Fairfield. It was to try and stop access to the GMT, or Green Mountain Power, right of way. But it's only been a couple months, it's 16 inches high, it's not gonna do anything. But it would be a municipal owned land, and it would be, obviously we'd have to consider sideline stuff like that. We wouldn't keep it high anywhere where it might be an issue. For instance, on School Street, when people cross from the ice cream shop, we're gonna keep it very low. But other areas where it isn't an issue, and it just adds to the diversity of the community in general, we probably give it a go.
And so it sounds like it would require some maintenance for a few months or so, at least in the beginning, to help with.
Yeah, we
any
just
kind
cut
of
out
parsonage
invasive
or-
species that we didn't want in there, and let the native ones get larger, because the invasive ones get in faster and they're more aggressive. So we can keep those down and let the native ones come through. After 2 or 3 years, the native ones have got the root system in there that helps them out compete them all by themselves.
Would you seed it at all in any way?
We could do. You can get plugs, which are even better. They're relatively inexpensive. And then you could start making a design out of it rather than, you could choose if you wanted to. Children from the library, from the middle schools and stuff, could go out in one of the meadows and you could explain about bees and all that sort of stuff. It could be a learning process opportunity as well.
A
Yeah.
couple questions. Has the tree committee looked at any of this?
No.
And in the recommendation here, it says to authorize staff to implement the changes to develop perennial meadows. So what does implement the changes mean? It's required.
Is that the word?
That's the wording.
My memory of it was that the trustees would, if they decide to do so, direct us to go and look and try and find a few sites. Then we would go to Evan and have them approve the sites. And implementation is simply not cutting, but managing.
So are you saying, instead of implement changes, that maybe identify,
Well, I guess the changes are not cutting.
right?
So I would be, I think it's a great idea. I do have a lot of concerns. So what I would like to see happen is that when we have the tree committee look at this and provide some feedback. And then we don't authorize any changes, but authorize staff to come back with the areas and pictures of the areas and more of a description of what's going to happen in those specific areas. But I would also like the tree committee to look at this. That's my personal.
I'm just curious what your concern, you see, you have some concerns there. I'm curious what as I see this, I see it as very, not a big issue, as being a very simple. It's not like there's something permanent, a permanent barrier. There's no hazardous materials involved with it. It's simply letting greenery or whatever, grass and whatever, bushes and such that are naturally accepted here, grow, and rather than have the Rick and the street department or the highway department have to go in and maintain the roadsides or what have you, these parcels, that we're just gonna we're gonna keep the invasive species like the wild parsnip and such, poison ivy, at bay to let it grow, and then if it doesn't work, and it sounds to me like this is more or less of a trial period to see if it works here. If it works here, then we go full out. I don't know, I don't see a big issue, that's
I
all.
think we're just looking for more specifics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
my main concern is, honestly, aesthetics. So you could have a meadow that
Right.
is beautiful, and you could have a patch of weeds that are completely out of control and don't work with the community that we have. So my main concern is where and what's already there.
Right,
What's it, how big? I mean, I do think it's a great idea, and I anticipate that we would move forward, or I would vote to move forward, but I want more.
yeah, I don't disagree with what you're asking there, I just didn't think that, then when we get down to something that when you say something about what's weeds, what's beautiful, it's kind of like artwork. When I drive around and I see people with wrought iron, homemade art, what they consider art, I think it looks like trash or whatever, and it's a very subjective thing. What one person's, art is another person's whatever.
Right.
So I'm not really
Let's
that-
also remember we're coming into winter,
Right,
so we can take
Right.
some time to
Right.
see
We're not- it's not
some more
urgent thing.
specifics,
Right.
because we're
Right.
gonna have snow.
Well, yeah, the old phrase is, a weed is any plant you don't want in your garden.
Exactly.
But
Right.
with chicory and so on, most people it's in lawns, they cut it down, but it gets 2 foot tall and it's neon blue, purple, it's beautiful. And,
That's right.
So Lori, would I be misunderstanding what you're saying to say that you would not want to approve the recommendation as it is, and possibly either change it or not make a motion at all?
No,
just
I
to
can-
have staff come back to us at a future time.
I mean, I would be happy to make a motion, and then you all can decide whether or not we should vote on that motion.
I just wanna make sure we're all on the same page as to what it is that,
Or you can make this motion and I'll just vote no.
well, no, I think
However
personally, I
you
think it
guys
makes
wanna
sense.
move ahead.
Why don't you make the motion you'd like to see?
Okay,
and
I
then
can do
we
that.
can vote on that.
Let's see, so I will make a motion that, that the, how do I wanna say that? That the trustees authorize staff to pursue 2 or 3 pilot areas for perennial meadows, as well as have a discussion with the tree committee to obtain their input, and return to the trustees with more specifics on those areas.
I'll second that.
Make sense?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Thanks.
Great, that passed 4-0.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
Robin.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for coming in. And I think Kristen?
Yes.
Hi, Kristen. So if you'd like to come on up and join us,
Okay.
thank you for coming today.
Where would you like me to sit?
You can come right on up near where the phone is, not that we're gonna have you talking to the phone or anything, but just to be near a microphone so that way those on TV land can hear you and know what's being said. So, thank you for coming today, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name. So
Balif.
Balif.
Balif. Mhm.
Thank you, I've already butchered someone else's.
That's
Um,
okay. It's very
Really
common.
butchered.
I did, yeah. So, if you can just start off by telling us a little bit about you and why you're interested, and we'll
Okay.
go from there.
All right. Well, I've been a village resident since 2006. My husband and I moved here with our 2 children in 2006, mainly because he got a job at University of Vermont as a professor of biology. So our 2 children, our youngest was just entering elementary school, I guess Summit Street, 3rd grade, and our eldest daughter was entering middle school. And so they've gone through all the public schools, and I think I just grew to love this area. I was one of a village neighbors that kind of wanted to see some improvements in this area, and so part of that was we started the train hop, and it was just a handful of us at that time. It's grown, obviously, and it's become an annual event, and that was really exciting to see. So, of course, to me, Brownell Library has been a huge part of that, and so for me, I think a library is part of that, is kind of the heart of a community. So I was kind of approached by Christine Packard to kind of come, and she invited me to come to this. I had no idea that there was a board, and so it was really interesting to attend the meeting, see what it was all about. I love to volunteer, I love service, and my background is I have my undergrad and my graduate degrees are in English, and love libraries. I substitute at Essex High School Library, and also work at Phoenix Books. And so thank you for letting me come at this. I just got off work, closed up, ran here. So thank you for extending and allowing me to come and talk to you. So.
Well, we appreciate you being here and taking up the opportunity, as not many do choose to volunteer, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And trustees, any questions?
Go ahead.
So have you sat on any other boards in the community? Have you been involved in any other?
No, I really haven't. And previously, before we moved here, I was part of the PTO and part of the communications as well as community volunteering. I've done a lot of volunteering in the schools. I think when we moved here, it was kind of a transition for me. So I've definitely done some volunteering in the schools, but not sat on any particular boards.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it that you think you'll bring to the library board?
I think just my willingness to do whatever I can to help out with whatever it is that they might have some specific needs, and I'm happy to help out. My background, of course, is in, education, literature, art, and kind of bringing community together with different activities. So because I'm still learning kind of what the board is all about, I guess for me at this point, it's just being willing to fill a niche that they may need or have, and yeah.
Good, thank you.
Did you say you've attended meetings of theirs in the past?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so in terms of what they do and whatnot, that feels like interest?
I'm getting there, yeah. I'm not quite sure, obviously because I was just asked in May, and this last meeting was the first time I was actually able to attend a meeting. So it's still something that I'm kind of learning about. So it was really interesting, to have the agenda in front of me, be able to kind of say, oh, so this is what's going on, this is what you're all about. And so that was very enlightening and, yeah, very interesting.
I know one of the things that's been mentioned to some of us in the past is that the Brownell Library is one of the most expensive in the state, and I'm curious what that means to you.
What it means, why it's the most expensive, or what do you, I guess.
If someone asks you that or says to you,
Yeah.
the Brownell is the most expensive library in the state, what would be your response?
My response to that?
Yeah.
Surprise. I had no idea about that. That's interesting. I don't know how I'd respond to that because I've never heard that before. So I would actually need to find out before I respond to you. I don't feel comfortable saying anything until I find out why it is, and kind of, yeah.
So then let me ask a slightly different question. Where do you see the library in terms of its role within a community?
Its role in the community. Like I said, for me, it really is, any library is, like I said, the heart of the community for me. And I think this library specifically, because it's been willing to open its doors to so many different community activities, I think that's been very impressive. That it's not just catering to one specific, group of people, that it opens its doors to children, young adults. They have programs for seniors and adults. So I guess to me, it really can be a place where people can feel comfortable. It can serve a lot of different needs for the community, so.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the library there's some directions the library could go in that it isn't, or that you'd like to see it go in, or that there's directions the library is currently going in that you think maybe they should be doing different things?
I would think that if I were to become more involved with it, I would have a better kind of vision about where they're at, what they're doing. I feel like that they are certainly, just sitting in on the meeting the other day was interesting to hear, like, some new ideas that they have about more outreach to the community, how to get more patrons to come in, certain, I think, age groups of patrons to come in. They were talking about maybe dedicating, you know, with people who have a new baby, to dedicate a book to them. And I thought that was a great idea, because it, you know, gets that new family. And I think getting children in with, I remember not here, we lived in Massachusetts, but I took my daughter to library story time and music time every week. And so that was hugely important for me as a young mother. And for the, you know, just to be able to meet other people and have that sense of community. So things like that I think are wonderful. And so anything to continue, again, reaching out to the community, I think is a great thing.
Any other questions anybody has? I guess one other question. So there are 2 available slots.
Yeah.
There are 3 people who are applying.
Yeah.
If you are not one of the ones selected, are there other volunteer opportunities you'd be interested in?
Possibly, yeah, possibly. I've meant to like volunteer at the library as like shelving, and I've actually applied for a couple of positions there. So I'm always up for, volunteer opportunities, so, yeah, absolutely.
Great, and so these 2 slots that are open, they are to fill vacancies through April of 2019, then after that, there would be an election, as these are elected positions, and we just appoint them when vacancies arise. So if there are no other questions, the way this process will go is shortly we will talk then about who to appoint. And
Okay.
we'll make a decision. You're welcome to stick around. If you don't want to stick around, that's up to you. And if you don't, there would either be a phone call or a letter, some type of notification that you
Okay.
would receive.
Okay, I might go home to see with my family.
The time is short and precious, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
Thanks
in.
very
Thanks
much.
again for letting me come in so late.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
So, looking back on the agenda, it looks like we are back onto old business 5A, appointments to the Brownell Library Board.
Remind me, because it's been a
Right.
while since we've had competition.
Mhm.
Should we go into executive
Yeah, I was
session?
wondering too.
Finish our business and then do that?
We haven't warned an executive session, so I would need a little bit of education, because I'm not recalling is if we haven't warned an executive session, can we?
I believe if business comes up that warrants going into executive session, it can be requested, but I don't know the requirements for warning an executive session.
Should we maybe take about a 5 or so minute break, and since we
Look it
have
up.
technology, look into it?
I'd be glad to look it up while we're talking about the reading file.
Sure.
Yeah, we can keep going.
Sure. So,
The amount of time we
manager's
talk about
report, to give you a couple extra minutes. So Evan's not here, he is away, George isn't here, he is away, and as such, you're dealing with me unfortunately, but we get the wonderful pleasure of having Lauren. So Lauren, is there anything from the manager's report?
I don't think so, except for the next meetings.
Okay,
I know one of the things we're gonna ask you to do is to set goals for budgets at the next meeting, that's one of the things. And we've got some other things on the agenda as well,
yes.
that were in the meeting file, that,
Yeah.
purchasing policy.
Yep, thank you for sending those in. Since you brought it up along those lines, personally, if that's something that is in our October 9th meeting packet as well, just again as that reminder?
It will
would
be.
Okay,
Yeah, and
Great.
in your 11th as
Yep.
well, I think that we'd like to have the joint boards voted in.
Yeah.
It's a joint policy.
additional reminders about the need for us to do that homework in advance and to not wait until last minute will be greatly appreciated, so thank you.
Bless you.
Bless you.
So with that, we can go on to the reading file.
Can we,
And- No, please. Oh, I'm sorry, trustee comments. Ah, crap.
well, that's part of the reading file, so I just wanted to make sure. So yes, I have a couple things. And Evan had asked me to bring some of these up. He and I met a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple things I asked him to look into, and then just one other one that I wanted to let everyone know about. So it's been a while, but we had a discussion here about the policy and process around developments, and there's supposed to be a landscaping fund if they don't do what they're said they would do or spend the money. I don't know all the specifics. Anyway, I had several people come to me again and ask about that. And so, since we had talked about it with Pat, I know Lauren's been involved from the beginning, but we had talked about it with Pat, I went back to Evan, who he had known those same people, or some of them had gone to him as well. So he is, and Lauren, I'm sure, and others are looking into specific projects that have been brought forward to say whether or not there's an issue that needs to be handled. And more importantly, is a process for the policy going forward. So he just wanted you all to know that, because it's taking up some of his time. And then the other thing I had asked him to look into, which he had also been asked by someone else, but I spent some time at the senior center in my role as a state rep, just kind of talking with them, and I spent about 4 hours there, and one of the things that came up was the fact that the doors are not handicap. So you physically have to open them, which I've been in there, but I don't notice because I'm fine with opening them, but there's quite a few people who have walkers. So anyway, I've asked that we look at grants, or can we put it in the budget for next year, what we can do to get those push button things. So he's looking at that. And then just to let you all know, one of the other things that came out of my time at the senior center is they would like to look into having an advisory council similar to what EJRP had. It had been talked about as part of the MOU process when they came under the village, and they just haven't done anything. So I said I would help them in whatever way I could. So I just want to let you all know that I've kind of provided them some information, and will probably help them draft some documents, and then they'll come before the trustees, and whether or not it's something we think they should have or not is up to us. But wanted to let everyone know that was on the horizon.
Great. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Lori. Any other comments from trustees? Elaine, if you want to take a break from that.
I got it. I got what we need.
Dan, any comments?
Good.
Oh, I'll say, so tomorrow is Capital for a Day,
Yes.
Chittenden County. And the governor and many secretaries and deputy secretaries will be coming to Chittenden County to meet in all sorts of different places. And tomorrow at 3:30, Governor Scott, Secretary of the A&R, Julie Moore, and a handful of other folks are going to be touring our wastewater treatment facility because of a recent award for innovation that the village received for the wastewater treatment plant. In addition, there will be 3 other sites in the village that are going to be visited by, not the governor, but Secretary Moore, Secretary Tebbets, and Commissioner Curley of the Department of Labor. So the high school, Commissioner Curley is going to the high school. Secretary Tebbets is going to Fish and Wildlife over by that way, over by West Street. And Commissioner Curley is going to the CTE. So there's going to be lots of officials in Essex Junction tomorrow. So it's a pretty good day for the village.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So then, reading file, and then going on to the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. And Elaine, what did you find about executive sessions?
So in referring to the Secretary of State's document on open meeting law for municipalities, under executive session, there is nothing in here that says that we have to warn going into executive session. However, the board has to vote on whether they agree there's an executive session is warranted. And one of the reasons to go into executive session includes the appointment, employment, or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that a public body must make the final hiring or appointment decision and explain its reasons for that decision in open meeting. So, I'd be happy to make that motion because I feel like that applies.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it applies in this instance. Does anybody disagree with that? Well, I suppose by the motion that would.
So I'll
That's
move
fine.
that we have reason to enter executive session by 1 VSA 313, section A3.
Could you repeat that, please?
1 VSA 313 A3.
Will you invite the assistant manager to attend, or?
Inviting Assistant Manager Lauren Morso.
I would second that motion.
All in favor?
All in favor? Any further discussion? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. So we will go and we'll take a 5-minute, 10-minute recess, and then we'll enter into executive session.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're also sounds?
Yes.
Great. So we have exit executive session. We are now back in regular session. Thank you, everybody. I will make a motion that we appoint Jean Grant and Helen Donahue to the Library Board of Trustees.
Second.
Any further discussion? I would just say that we had 3 excellent candidates, all of whom are well qualified, and so it's a very difficult decision for us to make. 2 just rose slightly higher than the other. We appreciate all who applied and hope that they run again on April 2019 for the elected seats. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great.
I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew. Well done.
Thank you all.